Hope feels like a whisper, intangible, fleeting, almost naive. It's not something you can touch or measure, not like blood pressure or temperature. And yet, somehow, it can do what medicine often cannot: help a body heal, extend the life of the sick, and soothe the deepest wounds. We tend to treat hope like a nice idea, a mental crutch for hard times. But what if that's wrong? What if hope isn't just an emotion, but a biological signal? What if the belief in a better future doesn't just comfort the mind, but actually reshapes the body, rewires the brain, and alters the course of disease at the cellular level? Consider this. In the 1950s, a strange and unsettling experiment took place at Harvard. Rats were dropped into jars of water. No escape, no footing, just open water. Alone, with no help, they swam for a few minutes before giving up and drowning. But if the researchers pulled them out, even just once, dried them off, and gave them a break, something astonishing happened. The next time the rats were placed back in the water, they didn't give up in 5 minutes. They swam for hours, not because they were stronger, not because they had more oxygen or better training. Something else had changed, something invisible. They had learned that rescue was possible, and that tiny belief, that fragment of expectation, transformed their will to survive. The only variable was hope. How is that possible? How can something imaginary, an idea, a belief, a possibility, translate into raw survival, into hours of physical endurance, where previously there were only minutes? It seems absurd. The body is made of flesh, blood, neurons, mitochondria. Hope is none of these. And yet, this experiment wasn't an anomaly. Across dozens of studies in humans and animals alike, hope has shown real, measurable effects. Tumors shrink more often in hopeful patients. Wounds heal faster. People live longer, not because of better treatments, but because they believe something better is coming. So what exactly is going on? Could hope be more than a feeling? Could it be a hidden survival mechanism, a biochemical force embedded in our evolution, something ancient, quiet, and incredibly powerful? Maybe we've misunderstood it all along, and maybe, somewhere inside us, there's a cellular language of hope. For most of human history, hope was seen as something ephemeral, a virtue, perhaps, or a flaw. In ancient Greece, hope sat at the bottom of Pandora's jar, the last thing left after chaos escaped into the world. To the Stoics, hope was a kind of suffering, an attachment to an uncertain future, best avoided. In medieval theology, hope became a spiritual force, a bridge between faith and redemption. Philosophers across centuries debated its moral worth, but always as an emotion, a mindset, or a divine gift, never as a physical force. Even in modern psychiatry, well into the 20th century, hope was treated as psychological, a flavor of optimism, a symptom of resilience, a protective factor against depression, but nothing more. It lived in the mind, not the body. It had no molecules, no mechanisms, no measurable mass, and yet that view is beginning to crack. Over the past 2 decades, neuroscience has begun tracing the pathways of hope, not in metaphor, but in brain scans, neurochemical shifts, and gene expression profiles. Researchers now know that when a person feels hopeful, the brain activates specific regions: the ventral striatum, the medial prefrontal cortex, areas associated with reward, motivation, and goal-directed behavior. In other words, hope triggers the same circuits that drive survival, hunger, and learning. It's not idle, wishful thinking. It's a physiological signal, one that floods the brain with dopamine, the neurotransmitter of effort and persistence. But it doesn't stop there. Hope also interacts with the hypothalamic pituitrinal HPA axis, modulating the stress response. It lowers cortisol. It enhances immune function. It even influences epigenetics, how genes switch on and off in response to stress. Hope, quite literally, reshapes biology. This rethinking is clearest in the science of the placebo effect. For years, medicine treated the placebo as a nuisance variable, a kind of fake healing that distorted clinical trials. But recent studies reveal something far deeper. When a patient believes a sugar pill will help them, their brain responds with real changes, releasing endogenous opioids for pain relief, activating serotonin pathways in depression, and even reducing inflammation. In Parkinson's disease, simply believing that treatment is coming increases dopamine in the brain, the very chemical the disease depletes. The placebo effect, it turns out, is not all in your head. It's real biology, triggered by belief, and at the core of that belief is hope. So why does this matter now? Because we're living through a crisis of meaning. Rates of anxiety, depression, and burnout are climbing globally. Young people are struggling with uncertainty about the future. Older generations face isolation and loss. In a time of climate anxiety, political instability, and relentless stress, despair is becoming normalized. But if hope is more than comfort, if it is a biochemical force, then it could change how we treat illness, how we design public health, how we structure education, and even economic policy. What if boosting hope is not just about giving people pep talks, but about activating their biology toward survival, healing, and growth? This isn't wishful thinking. It's a revolution in how we understand the human body and the hidden power within it. Here's a truth that makes many scientists and doctors uneasy. The body responds more to perception than to reality. We like to think of ourselves as purely biological machines, driven by molecules, electricity, and chemistry, not by imagination. But study after study reveals a strange and powerful force at work. What we believe can shape what we feel, how we heal, and even whether we survive. In Parkinson's patients, for instance, placebo treatments, completely inert injections, have been shown to cause a real release of dopamine in the brain. These aren't imagined improvements, they're measurable neurological changes, caused by expectation alone. During World War II, a battlefield surgeon named Henry Beecher ran out of morphine while operating on wounded soldiers. Desperate, he ordered his medics to inject saline, telling the patients it was morphine. Incredibly, the soldiers calmed down. Many showed reduced pain and didn't go into shock. Their bodies responded to the story they believed, not the chemical in the syringe. This isn't an isolated phenomenon, it's the rule. Studies across cardiology, immunology, and oncology have shown that patients who believe a treatment will work, even if it's fake, often recover faster, experience less pain, and report higher well-being than those who are skeptical, even if both groups receive the same physical care. And now, epigenetics has added a new, astonishing layer. Belief can flip genetic switches. Under stress, the body turns on genes that promote inflammation, cellular wear, and metabolic damage. But when a person feels safe, hopeful, or supported, that same genome quiets its alarm systems. Healing genes are activated. The immune system calms down. Wounds repair faster. In one study, caregivers under chronic stress showed altered gene expression, but those who practiced optimistic reframing had markedly different profiles. Despite facing the same challenges, it wasn't the situation that mattered. It was the meaning. This leads us to a troubling and powerful dilemma. If the body reacts not just to chemicals, but to beliefs, not just to treatments, but to perceptions, then modern medicine may be missing one of its most powerful tools. We've focused so heavily on drugs and surgeries that we've underestimated the biological power of narrative, mindset, and emotional expectation. The placebo effect is often dismissed as a nuisance in clinical trials, something to subtract from real effects. But what if it's the most important part? What if the story a patient believes about their recovery is just as important, or sometimes more important than the pill itself. And here's the even harder question. What if false hope is, in some cases, more physiologically useful than rational despair? Imagine two patients, one told their condition is terminal, the other told there's a small but real chance of recovery. Even if the odds are identical, the hopeful patient might trigger biological pathways that prolong life simply because they haven't surrendered. Does that mean we should lie? Of course not, but it does force us to reconsider how we frame information, how we talk about prognosis, how we deliver in a world where perception shapes biology. The stories we tell to patients, to ourselves, to society may be as potent as any medicine. And that means hope is not a luxury, it's a treatment, one we're only just beginning to understand. As the science of hope advances, it forces us to confront difficult and sometimes uncomfortable questions. If belief can change biology, if hope itself has therapeutic power, then is it ethical to use hope as medicine? Where are its boundaries? Throughout history, hope has been exploited. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, snake oil salesmen peddled miracle tonics with no active ingredients, sometimes relying entirely on the placebo effect to produce temporary improvements. Even today, pseudo-scientific wellness industries thrive by packaging false promises, tapping into the biology of belief without accountability. So where do we draw the line between healing and deception? If a sugar pill helps someone feel better, is it still a lie? Does the effectiveness of hope justify its manipulation? Or must truth always come first, even at the cost of a person's health? This dilemma only deepens when we consider that hope is not equally distributed. Research has shown that people with higher socioeconomic status consistently report more optimism about the future, and they tend to live longer, healthier lives. They feel more control, more possibility, more worth. But is that biological advantage, this surge of healing belief, something they earn? Or is hope, in some cases, a social privilege? Poverty, trauma, and chronic stress don't just break the body. They erode belief in change. They shrink the imagination. And with less perceived control comes less motivation to seek help, take medication, or engage in long-term healing. This creates a tragic loop. Those who need hope the most are often those least able to access it, not because they're weak, but because their environment has taught them not to expect rescue. In this way, biology mirrors inequality. The challenge is compounded by cultural divides in how we think about healing. Western medicine has built its strength on measurable outcomes, randomized trials, and biochemical interventions. It prides itself on objectivity, and rightly so. Those standards save lives. But in doing so, it often dismisses or downplays subjective experiences like belief, ritual, and emotional state. In contrast, many Eastern and indigenous healing systems have long emphasized the role of mindset, harmony, and energy in health. Practices like meditation, visualization, and narrative storytelling are not accessories. They are core to the process of healing. And now, neuroscience is beginning to catch up. We're learning that mental imagery can reduce pain, that belief can quiet inflammation, that intention, when practiced regularly, can reshape the immune system. Perhaps the future of medicine doesn't lie in choosing between East and West, but in integrating both, hard data and soft perception, side by side. This integration is already underway in surprising places. In pediatric oncology wards, doctors now use guided visualization therapy to help children imagine their immune cells attacking cancer, not as a fantasy, but as a clinical tool. The results are not anecdotal. Children who regularly practice hopeful imagery show stronger immune responses, reduced side effects, and even improved outcomes. This isn't spirituality, it's psychoneuroimmunology, the study of how thoughts influence the immune system. And yet, such approaches remain rare, often seen as fringe or optional rather than essential. The challenge ahead is scale. How do we bring these tools into mainstream healthcare? How do we train physicians to engage belief without veering into pseudoscience? And then comes the biggest tension of all. Can hope be taught? Can it be engineered, programmed into therapy, cultivated like a skill, injected into public policy? Or does that very effort ruin it? After all, hope often feels most powerful when it arises unexpectedly, when it breaks through despair, like light through a crack. Can something so personal, so spiritual, be institutionalized without becoming hollow? Can we standardize belief without sterilizing it? These are the questions that now haunt the cutting edge of medicine and psychology. Not just how to treat the body, but how to speak to the part of the human spirit that wants to live. And sometimes, despite all odds, here is the twist, the moment everything changes. A massive 20-year longitudinal study, involving tens of thousands of participants across continents, finds something that shakes the very foundation of modern medicine. People who score higher on standardized measures of hope, regardless of income, ethnicity, education, or geography, show significantly lower rates of heart disease, experience fewer strokes, recover faster from surgeries, and even exhibit slower markers of cellular aging. Telomeres, the protective caps on our DNA that erode with stress and time, degrade more slowly in hopeful individuals. Their immune systems are more responsive. Their cortisol rhythms, the body's stress signals, are more stable. These aren't placebo-fueled illusions. They're hard biological data. Hope, the study concludes, is not a luxury. It's a form of biological armor. This is the moment we must reframe everything we thought we knew. Hope isn't some fluffy, sentimental adorn to real medicine. It's not a personality trait or a vague psychological state. It's as real and vital as your blood pressure, as concrete as the level of cortisol in your bloodstream. When someone feels hopeful, their body behaves differently. The brain lights up reward circuits that regulate hormonal balance. The immune system shifts out of inflammatory mode. Damaged DNA gets repaired more efficiently. And the gut, now known to be a second brain, responds to hopeful states by rebalancing the microbiome, reducing harmful bacteria, and boosting serotonin production through the brain-gut axis. This is not metaphor, it's measurable. Belief becomes biology. Here lies the deeper paradox, the fault line running through our entire understanding of health. For too long, we've separated the mind from the body. Mental health is treated as abstract, subjective, even optional. Physical health is considered scientific, observable, and real. But hope shatters that illusion. It collapses the wall between brain and body, showing us that the division was never there to begin with. What you believe, what you anticipate, imagine, fear, or trust seeps into every cell. The body listens. The nervous system is a storytelling machine, constantly translating thoughts into chemistry, emotions into hormones, and beliefs into behavior. The placebo effect wasn't a glitch in our studies. It was a clue we ignored. And here's the final realization, the one that turns the mirror back onto the viewer. Hope is not something you passively wait for. It's not a gift the world gives you when things get better. It's something you generate, something you practice. And that practice has biochemical consequences. When you envision a better future, when you believe in your capacity to survive or grow, your brain initiates a cascade of physical changes that can alter the course of illness, stress, even aging. This isn't wishful thinking. It's willful. Biology, hope, is not weakness. It's power. A power that begins not in fantasy, but in the deep, ancient machinery of your cells, waiting to be activated. Here is where it all comes together, where the mystery becomes clarity and the science becomes direction. In recent years, Entire fields have emerged to explore what was once invisible. Psychoneuroimmunology, for example, maps how our thoughts and feelings shape immune responses. Epigenetics shows us that emotional states can activate or silence genes involved in inflammation, repair, and even tumor growth. What used to be dismissed as soft science is now backed by brain scans, molecular data, and longitudinal outcomes. We now know that hope, far from being a vague feeling, increases neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. It improves cardiovascular health, regulates blood sugar, speeds wound healing, and reduces the cellular wear and tear associated with chronic stress. Hope, in short, is no longer just psychological. It is physiological, tangible, actionable. This shift is slowly making its way into clinical practice. Some hospitals and surgical centers now include assessments of emotional resilience or psychological readiness as part of preoperative screenings. Not because it's nice to know, but because patients who feel supported, optimistic, and mentally strong tend to have fewer complications, shorter hospital stays, and better long-term recovery. Doctors are beginning to ask new questions, not just asterisk, what is your blood pressure, but asterisk, how do you feel about what's coming next? Mental state is emerging as a medical variable, one as important, in some cases, as age or comorbidities. The wall between emotion and medicine is cracking, and behind it lies a deeper truth. Healing is not just about what we do to the body, but what the body believes it can survive. For the individual, this insight is powerful and deeply personal. It means that cultivating hope isn't just thinking positive, it's a form of self-directed medicine. Practices like journaling about future goals, engaging in mindfulness, meditation, nurturing close relationships, and even immersing oneself in hopeful stories through books, music, or art, all show measurable impacts on the nervous and immune systems. Community, purpose, and imagination are not luxuries. They are interventions. They alter the internal chemistry of survival. The body listens to the mind far more intimately than we ever realized. And the mind, in turn, is shaped by the stories we tell about ourselves, our futures, and the world around us. Looking ahead, this understanding has the power to reshape the very foundations of society. Public health policy is beginning to account for emotional well-being, not just as a mental health concern, but as a predictor of physical disease. Urban design is evolving to include green spaces, social hubs, and areas of reflection, because connection and calm reduce inflammation. Schools are beginning to teach emotional regulation, not just to improve behavior, but to protect long-term health. We are beginning to realize that prevention isn't just about vaccines and checkups. It's about environments that generate hope, about systems that restore a sense of control, about stories that help people see a future worth living into. This is the quiet revolution of science, one that doesn't just ask how to fix broken bodies, but how to nourish the conditions that keep them whole. And at the center of it all is a simple, ancient force we've misunderstood for centuries. Hope, not a fantasy, not a luxury, but a language the body knows how to speak, and a medicine the world is finally learning how to use. Somewhere in your body, right now, something quiet is happening. Cells are listening. Tiny receptors are scanning for signals, adjusting their behavior in response to the thoughts you barely notice. A hormone shifts, a gene switches, a molecule of dopamine pulses in the dark, released not by action, but by anticipation, by the simple act of imagining a future that hasn't yet arrived. The body, it turns out, doesn't wait for certainty. It reacts to belief. And somewhere deep in your brain, in regions older than language, a network is lighting up, not for what is, but for what could be. This is not fantasy, it's biology, and it means that even the smallest flicker of hope has weight, has consequence. Maybe hope isn't a fragile dream, as we've been taught. Maybe it's the most durable, most adaptive trait we've ever evolved. More fundamental than strength, sharper than intelligence, more enduring than fear. Hope is the signal that says, keep going, that despite pain, despite uncertainty, something better is possible. And that belief doesn't just comfort us, it reprograms us from the inside out. It shifts our chemistry, rewrites our immune responses, protects our DNA. It makes survival possible long before success is visible. In this light, hope isn't naive. It's necessary because if belief alone can save a drowning rat, if it can calm a soldier on a battlefield, trigger dopamine in a brain ravaged by disease, accelerate healing in a child's body, then what else might it do? What might hope accomplish, not just for an individual, but for all of us? In a time of global uncertainty, of burnout, fear, and division, this becomes more than a personal question. It becomes a species-level inquiry. So, here's the question, the one that lingers, soft but unshakable, asterisk, asterisk, if belief alone can change the fate of a single body, what might it do for the future of our species if we choose to hope together?